Welcome to the Print Soft Cover. I'm Shubhangi Mishra and today I'm interviewing Dr. Dhruv Nath, who is professor at Management Development Institute at Gurugram. He is an active angel investor and also director at Lead Angels. Today I'm going to introduce his latest book to you, The Earnicons, which is third in a series of books on startups. So would you like to tell us about the first two books?
Yeah. So, when I was a professor, firstly, thanks, Shubhangi. When I was a professor, a lot of my students and my alumni used to come to me for advice on their startups, right? And gradually I started investing in these as well. And all the learning I had from the startups that I had mentored and from the startups I had invested in, which by the way went beyond just MDI students, all that went into my first book, which is Funding Your Startup. And I like the second part of the title, which is And Other Nightmares. Okay, because funding is not easy.
Right.
And having done that, then the next book was called The Dream Founder, which is basically about everything a founder needs to do to run his or her startup other than funding. So, marketing, execution, team building, recruitment, etc. etc. And this Earnicons obviously is the latest in the series, which is about market leaders.
Right. So Earnicons is actually about four profit-making enterprises in a loss-making
Yeah.
business ecosystem that we have, internet business ecosystem that we have right now. The four companies that Dhruv talks about in his book are Zerodha, Dream11, InfoEdge, and Zoho Corps. Sir, first of all, can you tell me, can you elaborate on the term Earnicons? What does that mean and how did you coin it?
Okay. So it's an interesting background which I must share. See, when the internet came in and when businesses started using the internet, there's a very interesting term that was coined at that time. People used to say geography has become history.
Right.
Okay. And the meaning is very, very simple because, before the internet, your customers would be local people. After the internet, you could be operating from Delhi and your customers could be in Kerala or Mizoram or wherever or even abroad. Therefore, you could grow very rapidly, and as you grow rapidly as an internet company, your economies of scale start clicking in. A, B, your brand starts building up. So you have a major advantage over the smaller guys as you're growing. And therefore, the fundamental thing which everybody started looking for was growth. Just keep growing, reach a position where you are one of the market leaders. For example, you look at, let's say, um, the e-commerce industry. There are
Right.
lots of players who started off, but ultimately only about 3 or 4 survived. Amazon, Flipkart, Jio, and perhaps now Tata's, right?
Right.
And the same thing in online travel. Same thing in food delivery. They're just two players, right? So the guys who grow and become dominant, they are the ones who survive. They become market leaders, and the other ones die. So what started happening was founders said growth at any cost and investors also said growth at any cost. Unfortunately, that was taken to mean growth even at a loss.
Right.
Right? And a lot of these companies grew and grew, but they kept making a loss. So they were not real companies. They were dependent on investor money. And the term unicorn, which was coined for internet businesses which had a market cap of over a valuation of over $1 billion. I mean, unicorn is a mythical creature. It doesn't exist. Similarly, these guys didn't exist because the day investors pulled the plug and said, no more money, that's the end of their business, right? So they're
That's right.
mythical businesses. Fortunately, there are a few, and just a few in India, and just a few internationally as well, and these four are among those few, which said, no, we are going to grow, but not at any cost. We will make money, we'll be profitable, and therefore we are not dependent on investors. And since they were earning money, and all of them have reached and crossed a unicorn status, which is $1 billion. Unicorns was a nice term to use because they're earning money, they're unicorns, they're earning money, and hopefully that will become a popular term in the future.
So, in the book we discussed the dot-com burst in the case of two companies.
Yeah.
Has a time come for startups in India where it's a bust for investor money? Do you think that will happen?
Okay, good question. So, first of all, investors over the years have been changing their attitude, their thinking towards these companies. So, like I said, 20 years ago, which is when the internet business really started, or 25 years ago, investors said, look, growth at any cost, you become a market leader, become a dominant player, and at that stage, because of economies of scale, etc., hopefully you will start making a profit. For most companies, it didn't happen. And what has happened is investors have started losing patience, number one. Number two, what has happened, if you look at the last 4 or 5 years, COVID happened, recession in parts of the world, particularly Europe, US interest rates going up and so on. So money became a little more scarce. So investors said, look, A, we are getting fed up of loss-making unicorns, loss-making companies. B, anyway, money is scarce and we have a good option to invest in the US itself because
Right.
rates are high. So investor money became scarce and investors said, sorry, no more investment for constantly loss-making companies. We are okay if you're loss-making, provided you can show us a path to profitability. So you may not be loss-making, may not be profitable today, but show me the fact that your cash burn is coming down,
Right.
so that maybe 3 years down the line or 2 years down the line you will be profitable. So I think in the future, definitely companies which are consistently loss making and showing no sign of getting out of this mess, they are in trouble. Investors will not look at them. But where there are these companies which are today loss making but moving towards profitability, yes, investors are definitely interested.
Okay. And since we're talking just a day after budget, tax on angel investments
Yeah.
has been
Yeah,
done away with.
yeah.
What is that going to, how is that going to affect the market in
There are
the
actually
angel
two
investors?
major things which the finance minister announced. One is, of course, angel tax, and I think the people watching this need to understand this concept of angel tax. See, what happened, and I think it happened about 10 or 12 years back. Um, you know, when an investor invests in a startup, he will invest at a certain valuation. Now, that valuation is a gray area. So, if the investor invests at, let's say, a valuation of 10 crores, right? But the government approved valuer says it should not be more than 4 crores, then that 6 crore gap which the investor is putting in is assumed to be profits, and that is taxed as profits in the hands of the startup. That's terrible. That's terrible. So that was angel tax. Over time, it became a little more, the government was able to reduce it to some extent. So then it was only international investors to whom it applied. Now, yesterday, they have completely abolished it. It suddenly opens up the possibility of investors. You know, the problem is it's not just tax. In fact, I have faced this. The problem is not just tax, the problem is the hassle. Because the founder has to spend a lot of his time, rather than running the business or building the business, he has to spend time with the taxman. Look, boss, this is not the right valuation. It is not profit. So a lot of the hassle, a lot of the time is taken away. A, B, investors are suddenly far happier, and therefore you'll have investor money coming in. I think the second very good thing which has happened is that long-term capital gains. Now it's at par. Earlier it was much higher than long-term capital gains for listed companies, right? Companies on the stock market. Now it's at par. So in both cases, it's going to be 12.5%.
Right.
And that's a huge benefit to the investor. So it's a benefit to A, the investor, B, the starter. And I mean, certainly this, I think what has happened is phenomenal for our Indian startup environment.
So while we talk of investor money, in your book you've mentioned how InfoEdge, Zoho, and Zerodha,
Yeah.
they refused investor money at the start, while Dream 11
Yeah.
could not procure it. So, and the four companies went on to become unicorns.
Yeah.
So, how can money at the start of your business when you're trying to grow be a bad thing? What happens to some of the companies that get so much of money and then probably run into losses?
Okay. So, first of all, this whole business of running into losses to a large extent is in the minds of the founder. Right? If the founder says, look, I'm going to run a genuine business, if it means I grow slower than I would have while making a loss, so be it. I'll grow more slowly. Right? And in fact, if you look at a company like Zoho, uh, it has not been growing at 300% per year, but it's been profitable all along. So, so first of all, that's in the minds of the founder, and all these four founders were very clear we're running genuine businesses. So I'll tell you what the founder of Zoho and which is Sridhar Vembu and Nitin Kamath, who's the founder of Zerodha, what they said. They very clearly said, look, when we take investor money, the investor gets involved in running the business, and for every decision we have to go back to him,
Right.
right? And if we have to run a startup, an internet based company, you have to be nimble. You have to be able to take decisions fast. You cannot wait for the investor who first says, show me an Excel, and then he points out flaws and you meet him again. It's too long. So we can't allow that. We want that freedom. I'll give you a very simple example from one of these stories. Look at Zerodha. Zerodha, the one thing which they are famous for is the fact that they so far have not charged any brokerage to investors. They charge brokerage to traders. That's a
Right.
different category, but investors no. So
Right.
long-term investors who take delivery of the shares, no brokerage. How did this decision come about? These guys realized, they said, look, um, our primary business is traders because they do a lot of trades and we earn brokerage for each trade, right? So 99% of our revenues come from traders. Investors are the kind, they will make, one trade, they will buy shares, then they will sit tight for maybe 5 months, 6 months, maybe 2 years. Therefore, the brokerage we earn from them is minuscule.
Right.
So it's only 1%. 99% from traders, 1% from investors. So Nitin Kaman had a brainwave. He has a lot of brainwaves, by the way. A very smart guy. So he says, look, if investors are only 1% of our revenues, why don't we charge them nothing? We will get in hordes of investors. The publicity we get will be phenomenal and we lose no revenues. And ultimately, some of these investors may actually become traders.
Right.
Now, the question you asked, how can investor money be bad? They decided this. Where was this decided? Over half an hour or 1 hour sitting at the departure lounge of Bangalore airport.
Right.
No Excel sheet, no investor to ask. Decided in the evening over 3 mugs of beer. There were 3 colleagues, Nitin was one of them, and implemented next morning. Nitin says, where could we ever have taken this kind of decision had there been investors involved?
Right.
So that's what these guys are saying. We have to be nimble, we have to take good decisions. Also, I think in fact Sridhar Vembu also made a very interesting comment. He says, look, one investor says you have to guarantee me an exit in X years.
Right.
How can I guarantee an exit? I mean, it may not be the. So what the investor wants and what is good for the company may be two different things.
Right.
So these guys were very, very clear. We don't want investor money because we want the freedom and we want to take decisions which are in the best interest of the company and not in the best interest of the guy who's put in his money and wants an exit.
Right. And can a lot of money at the outset lead to some bad habits?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, Sanjeev has made that statement. Sanjeev is and I met him several times, and every time there is so much to learn from this guy. Sanjeev is the founder of Naukri. They had no choice. They took in one round, and they took two more QIPs later. So they took in one round from ICICI Venture, which was very early on in the, I think, year 2000. And the amount they took, half of that went into a fixed deposit. Because Sanjeev is very clear, and by the way, all the other guys are equally clear. Too much money sloshing around means, you'll splurge it on fancy cars, five-star hotels, business class travel. That's not the way to build a business.
Right.
So I remember Sanjeev, in fact, he told me this. He says, look, when I started from the servant's quarter above my father's garage. And we paid my father a rent of 800 rupees. Right? And second-hand furniture, second-hand computers. And I used to make sales calls on my father's old scooter, two-wheeler. Right? That's really running a frugal business. So all these guys have been very, very clear, run a frugal business.
Right.
Don't have extra money sloshing around.
So, InfoEdge has a lot of profit-making businesses.
Oh, yes.
Especially Naukri.
Yeah.
But some of the segments you mentioned, like Jeevan Sathi and 99 Acres, are loss-making.
Yes.
Why is the company holding on to these loss-making brands?
Okay. So, firstly, they have four major divisions. Naukri is hugely profitable. It has 70% market share in the business that they operate in. They have another division called Shiksha, which is about education, which is also profitable.
Right.
99 Acres is almost profitable, and it should become profitable within the. In fact, I just spoke to Hitesh Oberoi, who's the MD. I was giving him my book, and also I had butter popcorn with him. He's very fond of butter popcorn.
Yeah.
So he said, look, 99 Acres, the big reason why it has not been profitable is it's a market leader, although not by much. Unlike the monopoly kind of status that Naukri has, 99 Acres does not have a monopoly status. It has roughly a 40% market share, but the other guys are also big, so somebody may have 30, 35. The problem is the real estate space over the last many years has not been great for multiple reasons, right? Demonetization was one thing which hit it. COVID obviously hit it. Then this RERA which came in from the government, that hit it. So there have been a lot of things happening. Now the real estate space has begun to grow, right? And as the real estate space grows, the revenues start coming in more, and therefore costs start getting amortized. So there is a good chance that 99 Acres will become profitable, maybe in this quarter, maybe the next. So they've been waiting essentially to ride out the poor period when the space was not doing well.
Right.
Jeevan Sathi is a slightly different category because Jeevan Sathi is in a space where they are number 3 in the country. And in internet businesses, it is not easy for the followers to be profitable. However, these guys have made a lot of investments and they're moving towards profitability. Hopefully, at some stage, they will. So, I think the key issue, what Hitesh told me very clearly, he says, look, we had faith. Yes, there will be some businesses which will take time to build, particularly where you are catching up with somebody else and you have a couple of other market leaders. So I think you have Bharat Matrimony, which is a market leader, number 1, and you have Shaadi.com, that's number 2, and these guys are number 3. So he says, you'll take time, but I think we are on the road to making it profitable. So they are basically banking on that. Had they seen the fact that there is no hope, they would have stopped this business. In fact, they have made a lot of investments, and wherever they've seen that there is no hope, they immediately divest. So they're very clear. Look, something which has a future and you need to build it, maybe take a loss for some time. If there is something which does not have a future, just get out.
One thing that I personally really like about InfoEdge, which is not a part of the book, are their ads.
Ah,
So
okay.
ads of Naukri.com and
Yes.
Jeevansathi.com both
Yes.
were quite iconic.
Yes.
But then we come to a company that is quite averse to advertisements, which
Yes.
is Zerodha.
Yes.
So why no advertisement when Grow, their biggest competitor,
Yes.
is completely bullish when it comes to advertisements?
Yes, absolutely right. So, by the way, Grow has caught up and overtaken them in terms of number of subscribers only recently, only in
Yeah.
this financial year. Till last year, Zerodha was the market leader. Even today, in terms of number of transactions, they're market leaders. In fact, in terms of number of transactions, volume of transactions, they are market leaders worldwide,
Right.
right? Which is something the finance minister and the SEBI chair is not very happy about, the fact that there is so much speculation going on. But anyway, keep that aside. Nitin Kamath very strongly believes, very, very strongly. He says, look, ultimately, so A, we need to run a frugal business. We have to make it profitable. B, ultimately, it is your product which should sell. If we need to market it, maybe we have the wrong product. Now that's his attitude. Right? Dream 11 was completely different. So fortunately, what also the product was great. People really liked it, and people started taking it on. There were two major uh, upheavals that Zerodha caused in this entire space of stock market trading. When they launched, which was in the late 2000 and I think 8 or 9 or thereabout or 10 is where they launched. At that stage, brokers used to charge a percentage of the value of the trade. Right? Now, percentage is okay. So let's say they charge, for example, 1%. If the value of your trade is, let's say, 1000 rupees, 1% is peanuts, it's 10 rupees. But that's not normally the value of the trade, it's normally a lakh or maybe much more. So if it's a lakh, then you're charging 1000 rupees, that's a huge amount. And traders particularly do a lot of trades. So he says, why don't we charge a flat rate rather than a percentage? Irrespective of the value of the trade, we'll charge only 20 rupees. Now, that was something which was, I mean, earth shaking. And you know what happened was the press, they lapped it up. My
Right.
God, this is a brokerage which charges only 20 rupees. There is, you could trade, your value could be 20 lakhs and you're only paying 20 rupees. So suddenly he got a huge amount of coverage. Effectively free marketing.
Right.
Right? Word of mouth then started kicking in. Right? Then was the zero brokerage, which was about 2014, 2015 types. Again, the press lapped it up because, I mean, how can this guy survive? Zero brokerage. Again, he got a lot of free marketing. So, A, his strong belief in the product and customer focus. Look, you give the customer what he likes, he'll keep coming back to you. And B, these decisions that they took, they have done, I mean, they have really got them a huge amount of free publicity and word of mouth, and therefore they have not needed to do any marketing. What happens from now on, given that Grow is spending a lot? Obviously, I mean, one doesn't know, but my guess is I don't think these are the kinds of guys who believe in huge amounts of marketing. They'll probably spend some, but again, that's a conjecture. I mean, it
Right.
really depends on what Nitin thinks.
So now there is bad news for Zerodha and Grow also, in
Yeah.
a sense that uh, a fee will be levied for transactions on such platforms because people were dealing in options and
Yeah.
futures and really risky
The fee will
trades.
be increased.
Okay, it will
Yeah.
be increased.
It was always there, it will be increased marginally.
So what next? What next for such businesses? Do you think we'll go back to trusting brokers?
So let me put it like this. In fact, Nitin has posted several comments. Even today, I read a comment of his in the news. The quantum of increase has not significantly impacted any trader. It's very, very tiny. Very, very tiny. So today, unlikely. In the longer term, because the government, whether it's SEBI or whether it's the finance ministry, they want to cut down speculation. See, I must explain a couple of things to your viewers. So the investor invests for the long term, and the
Right.
government is very happy with that because you're building up. The guys who do FNO, they are speculating on, within this month will the price go up or will it go down, and therefore it's risky.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, professional guys can do it, but you have a lot of retail guys who don't understand this, but they are dabbling in it, and that's
Yeah.
what the government wants to clamp down on, which is why this step has been taken. So yes, revenues will come down. So yes, what is likely to happen is across the board over time, not today, over time when this, this fee, the STT, the Securities Transaction Tax, starts increasing significantly, you may have a reduction in volumes across the board. Whether it is Zerodha, whether it is Motilal Oswal or ICICI Direct, it doesn't matter, everybody. But the fact remains, this impacts everybody equally. Except that if your customers are happy, if you're providing something to your customers and they don't want to leave, they'll probably stay with you. So overall volumes will come down maybe, but I don't think they will lose market share to the other guys.
Okay. Um, Now, coming to Zoho Corp, you mentioned that they train class 12th graduates also to work in their company. um, is it across managerial positions that Zoho doesn't chase after top engineering school graduates?
So first of all, approximately 15% of their manpower today comes from Zoho schools.
Right.
And maybe I need to explain this whole concept of Zoho school. It's a brilliant concept. I mean, what does Sridhar Vembu say? He says, look, why should you need an engineering degree to do a thing like programming? Right? In our villages, and he specifically started by focusing on rural Tamil Nadu because that is
Right.
where he comes from. In our villages, you have such bright boys and girls because of the fact that their families cannot afford to, send them to a great engineering college. The education stops after class 12. So he says, we will create the Zoho schools. We will pay them a stipend. There is no fee. We'll pay them a stipend, and there will be some formal classes. There will be some hands-on learning where they're working with other people from Zoho and therefore working on projects.
Right.
So it's a brilliant idea. It cuts down cost. It gets them phenomenal people who otherwise would be out of the ecosystem. And look at the other, the positive. If you're taking people in Bangalore or whatever, Pune or Bombay, many of these people have come in from smaller towns. They have to manage their house rent, they have to manage food, they have to manage electricity, everything. It's a hassle, right?
Yeah.
These are people who are living at home with their parents. Their parents take care of all this, and therefore their entire mindset, their entire time is productive. So they're very productive, right, compared to a typical average program. And they have good programmers because so they normally start as programmers, but many of them have grown into other positions. So this was the example of Babu. He's a product manager, and he is all over the world. He's in a solid managerial position. Yes, they also take engineers. They take a lot of engineers. They also take people who don't have an engineering background, but a good chunk of people come from this rural environment through Zoho schools.
But I want to understand, does this philosophy of not chasing after talent from top schools, does it cut through the entire managerial organizational chart, or is it just a certain level of workforce where we're training people as a way of giving back to society?
No, okay. So Sridhar has two viewpoints. So one is I want to give back to society, right? And this is one. But the benefit is it's a win-win. It's a win-win for Zoho. It's a win for Zoho. It's a win for the family which could not afford a good education. But they will go to good schools. They are going to good schools. In fact, many of these guys are IIT graduates,
Right.
right? many of the founders, many of the senior management. So, for example, this guy called Dandapani, who's now heading Zoho Schools. He's not one of the original founders, but he's
Okay.
a senior guy. He's from IIT Madras. So, yes, they do take those people, but this is one category of people who start as programmers. The good guys grow, and the guys who are probably only very good programmers, they continue as programmers. So, it's a mix.
Okay.
It's a mix.
And so we come to our last company now, Dream 11. Sridhar Vembu comes from a humble background,
Yes.
whereas Harsh comes from a rich Marwadi
Yes,
family.
absolutely.
And they sort of floundered at the start.
Yes.
Do you think founders who have a backing have more chances to fail? Like before Dream 11 really worked, they had a lot of mistakes. There was trial and error.
Yes.
And if there is a founder who's stumbling a lot right now, what can they learn from Dream 11 and Harsh's story?
So, first of all, you're right. Harsh did have very strong backing from a very successful business family. I think the very, very good thing I learned about Harsh when I met him, tremendous humility and acceptance of his weaknesses. So while the money came in, at least the initial money came in from his father, and he raised about 10 crores from his father, he was 100% honest about the fact that he and his co-founder, who's Bhavit, did not know how to run a business, and therefore all the money they got from the father was blown up within, I think, 2 years, right? And then the father refused to give him more. So I think the main thing here is that yes, if you have backing, from your family, if you have money coming in from family, sure, your chances of your being able to make mistakes, make blunders, etc., you get more chances. That is true. But that is no guarantee that you'll succeed. Harsh Jain succeeded because he said, "Look, I don't know anything. I'm willing to learn." And by the way, he learned a hell of a lot from his investors, especially Vani Kola, who's Kalari Capital. Right? So I think your attitude has to be, "Look, I'm willing to learn." Yes, if you don't have any money to start with, all you have is maybe your own savings, you'll probably grow slower initially. But ultimately, it is the attitude that, look, I have to manage, I have to create a solid business, and whatever it is, I am willing to learn. I think that's key.
So the message of Ernicons, at least to me, was one quote by Nitin Kamath that stood out: "Don't take money, make money." Thank you for watching us. This was the Print Soft Cover. Grab Dhruv Nath's book, The Ernicons, a third in a series of books on startups.